All right. For third time's the charm, right? That's what they say. So,
Something like that, right?
yeah, man,
Yeah.
I've been super excited. I remember when I heard your name for the first time. It was with Ryan Skeffington, and
Skeffington. Yep.
look, anybody he respects and chats with and is influenced by. Look, I'm game. I
Yep.
trust the man's words. So, how are you tonight, Ryan Patrick, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, man? And thanks again for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. You're doing a lot of things that I respect and uh, highly. So, um, just been really excited to talk with you
Yeah.
and to kind of find out more about your work and your journey, man. So, we have some wonderful people here already. Who's that guy? That's Mr. Ryan Skeffington. Excited for the chat, gentlemen. Well, I'd hope so, man. You're the reason we're here.
Yep.
I was telling you, I was telling Ryan before we started. So I remember your name coming up and just being such a cool influence to Ryan. So thanks, man, for being here. Tim McKay, Ryan's rep. There's a
Lot of
couple
Ryan.
different. They're switch, first and last, but they're Ryan's, right? Um, we'll get into that. I'm gonna star that one. We'll get. I feel like that might be a personal jab. I don't know. Some ribbing going on.
A little bit.
All right. So the introduction that I kind of start with usually doesn't go this way, but I love this. So Ryan Patrick is a United States Space Force officer, which
For
I
two more
think
weeks.
for 2 more weeks.
Yep.
So I've never spoken. It's a new branch, guys.
It's new, yeah. So actually, I was in your neck of the woods. I was in grad school, and would have been 2014 or 2015, and we took a trip up to NASA Glen, which is up in Cleveland. And on the way back, we're at McDonald's in middle of Ohio somewhere. And I was talking with a couple of colonels, and they're like, there's gonna be a space force in a few years. I'm like, no, there's not. And they're like, no, there is. And sure enough, I forget exactly when the law was signed, but 2021, I crossed over from the Air Force. I left the Air Force and joined the Space Force.
It's a department of the Air Force, right?
That's correct. Yep.
So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about. Well, I don't think a lot of people know of the Space Force. That's
No.
people. It's a real incredible, wonderful military. As part of our military.
It's tiny. There's more NYPD cops than there are uniformed Space Force members. So.
Well, that's kind of what I'm after. So being a United States Space Force officer, what does that entail? What is your day to day, and how did you get that crossover?
So the Space Force. So prior to Women 2021, all of the military space assets were spread across different branches: the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marine Corps, and then a lot of intelligence community assets. And so the Space Force is a way to really pull all those together under one, like, combined joint entity. And really, it has to do with money. So historically, a lot of the space money goes through the Department of the Air Force, and the Air Force is run by a bunch of fighter pilots. So they don't care about space. They take that money and they put it up for new jets, new training, that kind of thing. And people who care about space got tired of that. And that's honestly, the Space Force was an idea. They started it under, it might have been Donald Rumsfeld back 20 years ago. There was,
oh wow,
yes, 9/11 and a lot
Bush, right?
Yep, and 9/11 and a lot of the war on terror stuff kind of delayed it, but they've been talking about this for a long time. So they started it. There was only one guy, General Raymond at the time, one general in it, and then they slowly brought people over from mostly the Air Force, and we also have a lot of we call them inter-service transfers, ISTs, and they come over from the Army, the Navy, a couple Marine Corps. Mostly, it's a lot of Army guys, a lot of Army, cyber, and space guys, because the Army's big, so they can give up the bodies, and I think the Navy doesn't have as many people to give up to a new service. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just going to add. I think there's probably, when somebody hears Space Force, I think there's just an automatic misconception. Have a lot to do with satellites and stuff that as far.
It's launch satellites, ground systems. So I'm at the Pentagon right now. I'm in what's called the Chief Technology and Innovation Office. So we're doing a lot of digital transformation, trying to improve software stuff. But the Space Force, there are Space Force astronauts, right, who go up to space, but most Space Force personnel, they're buying, they're operating, or they're maintaining satellites, ground systems, or the launch systems on the West Coast and East Coast at Cape Canaveral and Vandenberg. Um,
I
and
think that's incredible, dude.
it's awesome. And like I mean, I'm absolutely blessed to have been a part of it. But I mean, all good things must come to end, right? And I've been in 11 years. My ride's over, and I'm in 2 weeks. I start. Or actually, just over 2 weeks. I'm starting with Blue Origin, which is Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos' space company. I'm going to do some be a ground system engineer and work with some of their new. They're building. They're historically a rocket company, but they're going to start getting into satellites. So I'm going to start working with them on their on the ground systems and doing the testing for that, which is something I've done. I've done that at a couple different stops along the way of the military.
That's more. It's so interesting. So a couple things. I respect the United States military, the Israel, anybody that takes the inspiration and passion and love for their country and puts action to that. I apologize for the random baby cries, everybody, but
I got four, man. I get it.
The 7-month-old, she runs the house for real. So, finding more out about the Space Force was incredible. But there's this other side to you, right? And I think that's probably the reason we know about each other. And we're going to talk more about the your influence as far as the military goes. But you're a sci-fi, techno-thriller, and science fantasy author, all self-published.
Yep.
How has that? So we'll kind of start at the beginning.
So I've always
Where did that start for you?
Yeah, so I've always been a big reader. I was one of those kids. I was reading chapter books in like kindergarten or first grade. My parents both big readers, so I just did what they did. Right, got a book and I read. My dad is very into sci-fi. I grew up watching Star Trek and Babylon 5 and Stargate and all that good stuff. So I naturally gravitated towards sci-fi books, but I really, really like, I'm a huge Tom Clancy fan. I really like Clive Cussler and a lot of those like more techno-thriller type authors. And when I was in high school, I started try to write a book, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And I can definitely say I was not successful when I was younger. Which when I see younger authors who are able to actually complete a story or a novel, I really had to tip my hat to them, because I was not able to do that. When I was in college, I didn't really write it all, but after I graduated, I had time, right? It was a year before my wife and I got married, and I was living by myself in Dayton, Ohio, in a little apartment, and I got really into writing. I started writing stuff, but again, I just wasn't that good at it. Like, I can read all I want, but I'm also an engineer, and I think I was just too analytical.
That makes sense,
right? So, but this is my creative outlet. I'm an engineer. I like numbers and technology and machines, but this is how I get that creative, the other side of the brain, right? I get all that flowing. So I kept trying, and I'll talk more about this later, but what my one goal and idea, but I kept trying to write this novel that I always wanted to write. I kept failing, and I'm like, well, screw it. I'm going to try to write something different. And this is what ended up being The Martian Incident. This was the first attempt at it. This would have been like 2014, right before I started grad school. I did not finish it at that time. So about that time I started grad school, and we had my oldest, so I kind of took a couple years off. But then right after I finished grad school, I moved out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I got involved with managing a SpaceX launch. I was traveling all the time, every other week, either to Los Angeles or Cape Canaveral. And on those flights, I started writing what is now The Martian Incident. And I mean, this is like a decade into me writing. I finally finished a book, and I was so proud of myself. And I read it. I'm like, this is awful. I don't even know what I'm doing. So I kind of put that aside, and I kept writing. And we moved out here. I'm in the DC area now, so moved out here, and I just kept writing. And then the pandemic hit, and a lot of stuff just slowed down. And I think a lot of people started writing or started picking back up writing thing, because a lot of these writing groups are forming, and people are starting to knock out novels and stuff. And I wrote another book while I was I was home a lot, because they weren't letting us in the office as much, but I was working in a secure facility, so can't really do that kind of stuff from home. And sure. I wrote another book called Lag Delay. I actually finished that. That's my second book, just came out last month. I finished it. And with how many novels I haven't finished or just have tossed out a nearly finished draft, like that was just a huge step for me. And then I started writing some other stuff. I have a 90,000 word novel, The Martian Incident, which
Yep.
again, we'll talk about more about what it's supposed to be, what it is, and what it isn't later. And I started editing it, and that was how I got good at editing a book. I'm like, this has some good parts to it, but then there's also parts that just need to be completely junked or written. But other parts, hey, I just need to write, take out a line here, take out a line there. And I know you write. I don't know how far you are in your writing journey, but
Very newbie.
editing is so hard. It's
I'll
hard.
bet.
It's hard because there's no right or wrong answer. It's not like engineering where like, hey, I either know that I'm going to be within my component's limits or I'm not, right? You either, or hey, my spacecraft's going to work or it's not going to work. It's not a binary on off like that. There's, hey, is this the 95% solution that's good enough to publish, or hey, do I need to completely rework it to get to that point?
So, what? Real quick, kind of, were you? You said your dad was into sci-fi. So when you found that love, I know, for literature, or even if it was just sci-fi, period, were you super young? How old would
Oh
you
yeah,
say you were?
so I discovered Tom Clancy when I was like in 5th or 6th grade, and like that got me started on like adult books, right? Because before that I was reading like Harry Potter, Hardy Boys,
Oh
that kind
yeah.
of thing. And then I
When did
got
you graduate high school?
2008.
Okay, we're almost. I was '09, so
Okay,
we're right
yeah,
there.
yeah, you're my brother's age. He's
Yeah,
also
Harry Potter was like it.
yeah. So he's also a huge reader. Me, him, and my dad almost read all the same stuff. It's like sci-fi, like Tom Clancy stuff, and almost no fantasy at all. And we can talk about that more later. But like, I've slowly gotten into it, but it's just not what I read as much as like the sci-fi.
I think that's a great take because me, especially, I'm going to speak from personal and from what I've seen. Also, it's like if somebody reads fantasy, they read sci-fi, or if they read sci-fi, they read fantasy. And now that was different for me. I didn't think I'd be into sci-fi at all, and I'm loving it.
Interesting.
Like, so fun. But that's a stereotype I had.
Yeah. So my dad's a total jock. He played football at the University of Maryland, and but he's also very, very into sci-fi. Like so he's like, does that do things, but like fantasy, that's for girls. Like I don't read stuff. He loves Tolkien, but he never got into any fantasy other than
That's funny
Lord of
because
the Rings.
Tolkien's pretty flowery
Right?
compared to a lot
Yeah.
of fantasy authors.
He made us read the books, and he took us to see the 3 Lord of the Rings movies because that was his thing. He's a big Zeppelin guy, loves Lord of the Rings. But yeah,
Over the hills and far away.
Yep. And I want to say about 6th grade or so, I read Dune, and that was one of the first ones. I then I read Foundation, the Asimov stuff, and I read a bunch of Asimov, and that was great. And then I want to say I was a freshman in high school, so been about 14, 15. I read Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds, which is still to this day one of my all-time favorite books. One of my
What was
all-time
the
favorite
name of
authors.
it?
Revelation Space.
Okay.
If you've played Mass Effect, you'll see where they got some of their influence from for the Reapers. It's pretty cool. Alistair Reynolds he has a PhD in astronomy, and he worked for the European Space Agency. And now he writes like hard sci-fi books. And
astronomy was the coolest class I ever failed.
Like I never took it, but I love that stuff. I love just going out and seeing.
It was a high school class. It was like I did everything. I learned, but I couldn't take tests, and I failed it miserably. But I learned a lot.
It's cool, and he really gets into it with like different, like the stars, material matters, and all that, like cosmic scale. And that book just absolutely blew me away. And then when I was in high school, I read a ton of sci-fi. Read a lot of like Greg Egan, Ben Bova, that kind of stuff. As well as a lot of Tom Clancy, Clive Cussler. It's funny. I don't know if you ever read any Clive Cussler. Dirk Pitt.
I haven't.
Okay, so the movie Sahara is based off one of his books. Have you seen that with I think it's Matthew McConaughey? But
yeah, I have seen that.
So my wife and I, she's also a big reader, but our only overlap author is Clive Cussler. But she reads a lot of like Sarah J. Maas and Fourth Ring and all that the fantasy stuff. But yeah, so I've always been a big sci-fi guy, and it's funny because I've actually struggled to write sci-fi. I either get too far down in the weeds with details, or I I don't think if I introduce new technology or concepts, I don't really explore them as much as I want to, and they get frustrated when I read the
Do you think you
draft.
put pressure on yourself
Oh yeah.
writing those like absolutely accurate
So
details?
yes, because I know my stuff, right? Like that's my day-to-day life is these satellites and rockets, and like with Blue Origin, we're gonna start building things that take people to space, and like that's science fiction, right? It's
It's
crazy.
like for privately.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're trying to. I mean, they take the NASA and DoD money, but I mean, a lot of stuff is just Jeff Bezos and Elon opening up their pocketbook and being like, I want to go to space. It's nuts. It's totally
Which
different
brings in a very different aspect, which there's pluses and minuses for that, right?
Oh yes.
And they're pretty drastic.
And the you see that with working with a company like Space, and I spent a lot of time working with SpaceX. I know them very well, and Blue Origin, and these companies. It's very, very different than the government mindset, and honestly, it's mostly for the better. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle between the government take no risks thing, and then the private contractors take all the risks and go as fast as possible.
Yeah, because it's all about like the dollar amount at the end. So does Space Force collaborate with SpaceX?
Oh yeah, so the Space Force has 2 launch providers for all of our national security launches, and that's United Launch Alliance, which is a Boeing Lockheed team up effort, and then there's SpaceX, and then we also work with them on some other projects. They do a lot of stuff in the classified realm as well. But
so Boeing has got their name in their hands in a little bit of this.
Oh yeah, so I work with Boeing Space Systems is actually mostly, if you know Howard Hughes, it's the old Hughes Space. Howard Hughes was the big inventor guy. He was there's a movie about him. I forget who.
It sounds very familiar.
Yeah, so Allen, California, he had a whole bunch of companies, and one of them was a space company, right? It built satellites, and Boeing bought them, and that's a lot of Boeing Space is just the old Hughes Space stuff. But Boeing's an interesting company. When I see some of this, I've never worked with them on the aviation side, the air breathing side, but when I see stuff, the more recent press stuff, it makes sense. There's some issues there at the headquarters company level.
I think that's super interesting. I think it has a little bit to say about our past, a lot about our present. Sorry about the craziness behind me, and in the future. It's really exciting. Kind of diving into that was so first I'll ask this: how old were you when you joined the military?
Oh, I was 18. I was 18. I went out to the U.S. Air Force Academy for basic training. It was June of 2008.
What did you do in the Air Force?
So that was then. So the Air Force Academy, it's in Colorado Springs. It's like West Point or Annapolis before the Air Force and now the Space Force. And so you go, and it's like the movies, right? You go on the bus, they take you, they shave your head off, you swear in, and you're a cadet, and you're under UCMJ, and you're in the military. So
I went through MEPS and everything. I have Crohn's disease, so I wasn't allowed to go to basic, but
okay.
I was signed up and did everything for basic.
Oh yeah.
I wish I was able to. I think what you're doing is incredible.
Yeah. I would highly recommend if people are interested. The military is great. Whether making a career or not, that's a completely different story. But doing your 4-year enlistment or becoming an officer and doing it for a few years, I wouldn't trade for anything. It's been great.
I love to hear that. I've heard a lot of people. My father was in I was born on Edwards Air Force Base.
Okay, I know Edwards.
Yeah, and 3 of my 4 uncles retired from the Air Force. It's very much what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I get the I don't want to say hype, because it's not hype, but I get the passion that goes into wanting to serve your country. Now I wasn't able to, but I get and respect more than anything what you're doing, because if there weren't guys that said, I have this bigger calling, this itch that I have to scratch through public service, country service, we wouldn't be here. So huge amount of respect goes to that. I'll always shout that out no matter what. Because again, if it wasn't for guys like you doing what you're doing, whether it's an infantry or systems or intelligence communications, we would not be sitting here able to do the freedoms and talk to people online and have fun and read books like we do now. It's very important for everybody to know, because I think it's lost a little bit, especially more recently. So I do like to remind people, man, it's an incredible thing.
It's a blast. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Like, this just, it's been, I've been able to see things and do things I would never been able to had I not raised my hand to join.
So I feel like I know this answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Through Blue Origin, was that an opportunity you got through being a part of the Space Force?
Nope. So it was,
okay. I was wrong.
So it was networking. And not to go into a career job discussion, but networks are important. Last year, so if I was not getting out, I would be moving this summer in a few months. And I call up my functional. I'm like, hey, I know I'm up to move. Is there any way I can stay in this area? And they're like, nope, you're going out to Los Angeles, which is the big mecca of Space Force acquisition engineering stuff. I'm like, well,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm like, it's a tiny little base right next to the airport. I'm like, well, I don't really want to go there. Like, well, you've never been out. You've never been stationed there. So we're going to send you. I'm like, okay. And about a month later, click the button and I'm separating in end of June of 2024. And, but before I got out, I talked to people, right? And that's what you do if you're looking for a job. And I knew Blue was hiring at that time, and search around, and on LinkedIn, there's a guy, and he's connected to one of my high school football buddies, and he's like, and I'm like, but he's like a Blue Origin engineer. I'm like, I wonder if I can talk to him through my buddy. And so I got a connection. I start talking with him. He's like, yeah, well, you would be a perfect fit. Let's get it all set up. So I actually did a program called Skill Bridge, where I went to work for them for 3 months, January through March of this year. I got to wear civilian clothes and go work in their building and get free coffee all day, which was nice. And then I'm back now with my unit, but it's basically an internship, and I got hired into a job that I was doing there. So it's one of those like little programs in the military that people don't know about, but it helped out.
I like to hear that, because you didn't just make a decision, a rash decision. It was something you did research on, you networked, and that's important, man. Making big decisions like getting out and with your time
and making sure your family's on board. And honestly, the family was a big part of it, because my wife didn't want to go to Los Angeles either. So
I cannot blame anybody for not wanting to move to Los Angeles.
So I think, having been out there a lot, right? Like, I spent a ton of time in either the base or SpaceX or some other facilities out there. It's actually, the people there get a really bad rap. LA is not that bad. It's just not for me, right? It's too big. There's just concrete everywhere. It's not where I want to live. So
I get that. It's a desert, and there's like cities, desert, city, desert. Very hot. I would sweat to death.
Oh yeah.
So what has your publishing, being a self-published author, there's this journey where you start and learn a bunch of crap, right? And make that decision to self-publish. How does that look for you?
Yeah. So when I first went into this, I thought I want to be traditionally published, and I was going to do it all under like a pseudonym, because I was going to still be in the military, and plans change, right? And so traditional publishing is not what it was, and that's when a lot of my information when I talked to people was old, and it's not. What I didn't want to do was marketing. I'm not the type person. I'm not going to sell myself. I'm not interested in running Amazon ads or Facebook ads or anything. That's just not my personality. And I thought, hey, traditional publishers going to do that for you. And then I started listening to podcasts and listening to interviews, and the traditional publishers are not doing that anymore. It's you do it yourself. They'll get your edit and cover, but they're basically beyond that. Unless you're a big author, you're on your own. So
I'll also argue with you about your title. Like, I didn't know that until today. Like, talking with my first interviewee, Anthony Ryan, is like, he had to argue with the publisher over a title. And not that I think that that's like this flabbergasting thing. It was just to know that as a traditionally published author, obviously these people are professionals. They know what's selling and what they, but that still doesn't leave room for somebody to say, hey, I would rather do this, or I'd rather do that. And you've got to find that sort of freeing after learning what it's like to be a traditional
Mhm.
author, which is a great thing. But it's also a great thing to do your own
Yeah, I know.
self-publishing. There's lots of
Got
opportunity in
and,
that.
and there's control, and it's also you, success is on you, the blame's on you if something goes wrong. And I'm gonna be honest, I like that. Like if something doesn't work, it's because of me. It's not because of anyone else. And there's something to be said about that. You can't your success can't be waved away by, hey, my publisher is really good, or your failures can't be waved away because, oh, my publisher didn't support me. It's all on you, man. And honestly,
Yeah.
I like that. I'm okay with being an army of one in this type of thing, and it's worked out pretty well so far.
I
The
think
one,
as long as you have ambition and
yeah,
you know that what you're doing is something that somebody else that has success has taken the same road doing, because people who have never done it, you make mistakes. And I don't think it's
and how,
necessarily 100% on the author anymore. It's like there is somewhat of a luck thing, right?
oh, there has to be, right?
There has to be.
Yeah, and so I have a different process. It's all that. I have a different process than other people because not only do I have to go through the normal, you know, draft, edit, publish stuff, I have to, because of security clearances and whatnot, I have to run all my stuff through the Pentagon. So I got the Martian incident in pretty good shape, and I sent it to the Pentagon, and I didn't really know what was going to happen. And about a few months later, they're like, "Hey, you're cleared for publication." I'm like, "Well, sweet." And
Wow.
then like, what do I do now? So I did the cover, and I formatted and did all this. I mean, and I put it out there in the beginning of December, and I'll probably I'll go into this a little bit now. So the Martian Incident is originally supposed to be a prequel.
Okay.
To my big One Golden Idea sci-fi series, which is the Born Identity meets the Expanse, but with like
Mm,
basically all myths are real. Atlantis was real, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So this is like the one every author has it, right? The one book you've always wanted to write, one series you've always wanted to write.
sure.
And this was supposed to be a prequel of that, and that was how I originally justified it. Things have changed now, so it's no longer a prequel. However, I'm like, well, I've got a book. It's done. It's a self-contained story. I may as well just publish it, right? Like, because I was there were points where I'm like, I don't. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just hold on to it. Like, no, I've got a book. It's done. Let's see how it works, and it's done pretty well. I I'm done better than some people have done better than me, but I'm just happy. I'm not about the sales. I just want people reading my stuff. So when I was a kid, when about 15 or 16, I read Michael Crichton's Sphere, which is another one of my all-time favorite novels. And if you read The Martian Instinct, you'll see the parallels there to that. And I remember reading it and staying up all night to read that book. I'm like, I want to be that author that someone stays up all night to read my book. That's what I want to do. It's not about sales. It's not about the money. It's about writing books that people stay up all night to read.
I think that has a deep foundation in itself, to feel this way about a book yourself. You've been through this experience, and to want to give that to another reader is incredible. So to publish a book, it's like I look from the self-publishing side of this, because it's an honorable and oftentimes something you won't monetarily gain from a little bit for a little bit, which again I understand and can totally relate to. Look, I'm doing this, and it's a passion of mine. I want people to read it and enjoy it rather than that monetary gain. But look, the monetary gain is nice, right?
It is.
Which comes along with inevitably more readers, and I think that you, by starting during this career in the military, have given yourself a little bit of an edge. And also it's eye-opening for people who don't understand the military life. Like, you couldn't just publish it. You had to get clearance and
I not to get it too specifics, but like some people have different processes. I've seen some stuff, right? Like I've been read into certain programs and whatnot, and I have lifetime, anything I write that publishes has got to go through the Pentagon.
okay.
Lag Delay had to have a lot of changes made. It wasn't so much I was consciously revealing classified information or anything like that, but there were things that are too close to what other people are doing, as well as the big one was I used a name. The book's based around a special access program that's kind of like gone rogue, and there's people trying to kill the protagonist to protect it. And I chose just a random combination of two words because that's what most special access programs are in real life. I'm like, well, these are two that would never go together. Well, turns out that one of the words is used for a family of them, and I had to change it. So that one was easy. That was a fine replace. But there's other stuff.
I think it's necessary.
Yeah, and it is what it is. I mean, that series. So the techno thriller is not something I plan to. I'd never planned to be a techno thriller author. I was planning just writing sci-fi.
What's the difference of in sci-fi and techno thriller?
So techno thriller is Tom Clancy or Michael Crichton. It's 5 minutes in the future. It's our world, but technology is a little more advanced, and it's exploring those types of technology and the impact on people. So like Jurassic Park, Sphere, Hunt for October, it's just a little more advanced than what we have.
So Jurassic Park would be
that's considered techno thriller, yeah.
Okay.
And there's honestly not a lot of, like, one of the reason I'm writing them is I don't find enough that I want to read. So I'm rightly or wrongly, I'm writing books that I would want to read if I was a reader, because I don't think there's enough out there.
Okay, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. So sci-fi is obviously more of, I mean, techno thrillers are kind of in between a regular like Clive Cussler thriller and then like far future expand sci-fi. So
it sounds fun because without knowing anything and hearing what you just said, like I'm picturing like mechs on a planet that is the author's imagination, and mechs, some more mechs. But hearing you say it's our world with a little bit more of a technical technology.
Yep. So, and this is something I learned while writing Lag Delay, and I'll get better in the future. The tech in Lag Delay is there's humanoid robots that are exploring Venus, and the protagonist is controlling them from a virtual reality headset set up at a facility out in Los Angeles. So not possible right now, but that's maybe potentially something in the future. Sure. Not as cool as I probably could have made it out to be, because the sequel to it, it's basically going to be repeating myself here, Hunt for October meets Jurassic Park. So still working on that.
I've realized talking with you, I need to watch some more movies and read some more books, because this is very interesting to me. I love that, finding new things that I'm excited to watch and read.
Michael Crichton's great. So shockingly, most of his books have been made into movies. Only a couple haven't, but he was the guy who created ER, but he did like Jurassic Park, Sphere, Timeline, Rising Sun. I'm trying to think of some.
And he passed quite a while ago.
He did, and he wasn't that old either. He was maybe 50s or so.
Yeah,
he was a really big guy. I think he was like 6'7", 6'8", and I think he had some heart issues, maybe due to his size. Yeah, but yeah, so there has never been another author like him, and I'm not trying to say I want to be like him, but those types of books which are like, hey, it's our world, but something else is going on. I love those.
The man sparked something in you that you didn't know was there, man. Mm-hmm. And to want to be like that is incredible, man. He's a household name. I'm 6'5", and I don't often have to look up to people, and I'd have to look up to that guy, which I find incredible by itself, man. Mm-hmm. A lot of those guys I find out, I've had some buddies that were super, super gargantuan, or across, kind of like pen pals. And it's kind of crazy. There's a guy in Asia. Well, there's lots of guys in Asia and the United States that it's a tumor in their pituitary gland, mm-hmm. and they will never stop growing until their heart just gives out. It's super kind of sad, but the size of these people, man, it's incredible. I don't know why I journeyed into that, but this is the first time I've talked to somebody interested or writing in the techno thriller / sci-fi, and with the same inspirations as you've had. It's very unique, and I knew it would be. It's been very exciting to look forward to. When you sit down to write, are you a pantser? Do you outline? If you do outline, how deep do you outline?
So I tried pantsing for a while. It didn't work. And then I outlined, and I started outlining more and more. I'm an engineer, right? I'm gonna outline.
Analytical.
I'm gonna get real far down the outlines. And honestly, the last 3 books that I've written, don't like any of them because they're too outlined. And and so the thing I struggle with the most in writing is character motivation, particularly until everything hits the fan and it's a fight for survival. And I found I'm outlining too much. So the stuff I'm working on right now, 1 sentence for a chapter, if that, just a couple words, and I'm letting myself, especially early on, like later in the book when all your plot points need to come together, I have a little more detail. But early on,
giving yourself that creative freedom.
Yeah, you have to, right? You got to give yourself a little more room to write in, because if the box is too small, it feels forced, and your characters feel like, well, I'm going from point A to point B because I have to, not because I want to.
It circles back to a huge point that I brought up earlier, and I wanted to bring up with you. Is like these first stepping stones that you look back and you're like, okay, this isn't my best work, but I'm going to move forward. And you do, and you look back and you're like, oh, this is even worse than I expected. That's important. I feel like that is an extremely important step to whether you love it or you highly dislike it. It's important to move forward. Would you say that's?
I would say it's incredibly important. You can't get stuck on one thing. So something also that's helped me with that is beta reading, and that's how I met Ryan Skeffington. Was I beta read his book? I beta read a lot. I'm actually looking. One of my buddies is going to be dropping a big old sci-fi heist novel on a cruise ship. I'm getting that on Monday. I'm very excited because I like beta reading because it helps me, right? I see what other people do right and what they do wrong, and I'm able to analyze that and see that. But it helps them as well, right? I'm able to provide feedback on it, and that's one of my favorite things to do with writing is to be alpha and beta read and give feedback to other people, and that's really helped me a lot. I'll beta read for them, they beta read for me. I get that feedback, and I'm able to see my own flaws and what I do right, what I do wrong, and able to improve my own writing. That's a extremely valuable, right? It's a feedback loop. You get feedback, you improve a little bit, you send it out to people, they give you more feedback, and in theory, you're becoming a better writer. But it's hard. I think
that's smart. And like you just said, it's hard. I think what I've noticed as far, being new to this pretty much, I didn't start reading as a kid. I've just really put my head to learning and talking with people like yourself to never stop learning, because I found a really deep passion for literature. But yeah, learning from what different authors do, even at the beginning, all the way till they've been veterans, 20 years down the road, they're still learning. And if you follow where your inspiration and your heart and your passion lead you, there's no failing that. And yeah, I just think that it's so fun hearing everybody's foundational story, especially somebody I'm very unfamiliar with, or a topic I'm very unfamiliar with, such as where you kind of started. That's techno-thrillers and sci-fi was a thing that I didn't see myself enjoying. I don't know if have you read any Christopher Rocchio?
I have not.
So I always bring him up because he's one of the only sci-fi author I've read. But incredible. I'm absolutely, it's a science fantasy, and he's blowing my mind and so many others with I don't really know what it is, to be honest with you. It's not super hard sci-fi. Is that the
Sunder series? I'm trying to think of what. No, I've heard of it. It's on my Goodreads to read list. I just have not gone to that yet. I think you'll like it. Yeah, I generally don't like the softer sci-fi. I prefer harder stuff, but also a lot of the harder sci-fi, there's no characters. And when I was a kid, that didn't bother me as much. But now, like writing and reading a lot of the classic sci-fi, as flat characters as you can get, and there's no development, there's no depth to them. They exist to move the plot forward. And I feel like a lot of softer sci-fi authors, because they have to write better characters. It's not always the case, but I feel like that happens.
I think that this is the perfect medium, and I'm not just saying that because I enjoy his books. It's not hard sci-fi by any means. I'm not a huge hard sci-fi guy, but there's definitely great characters.
Mhm.
And there's elements that you would consider somewhat, I don't know, to me it's a gray area
Mhm.
to say whether it's soft or high or hard sci-fi.
It is so
um,
subjective, and people get so hung up in the details. But
so for instance, what I would consider somewhat of a hard sci-fi point in his books, it's like 50 years goes by, he's been frozen, he wakes up, there's these different worlds, but there's many characters that you meet along the way. Like you start out
Mhm.
learning and knowing what the end result is in this guy's life, and you get to enjoy his journey, which I've
Mhm.
only read the first book, and there's going to be 7 or 8, I believe.
Wow.
So the characters are wonderful and the events are vivid.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's my take on it. um David, my guy, I bet Ryan is a fan of Neil Stevenson.
I've read some Neil Stevenson. I haven't read that much of him, but
What does he write? I
what
don't
is,
remember what he wrote. That sounds familiar. David, throw it in there.
I think he's
Uh,
Snow Crash. Yeah, Project Hail
oh,
Mary's harder sci-fi. I've read all three
I
of Andy Weir's.
I just got Snow Crash in the mail. It is Neil Stevenson.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I've read another one. I starts with an A. I can't think of the top of my head, but I think I've read a couple of books by him.
I haven't
Um,
read any Andy Weir, and I'm really excited
so
to read.
I recommend skipping Artemis, but definitely read The Martian and Project Hail Mary. Artemis did not work for me. I won't bias you too much, but it was not as good as The Martian or Project Hail Mary.
I've heard that Martian is like out of this world realistic as far as like scientists actually reading it and uh, debating
It,
how close it is.
yeah, it's pretty realistic. I am not as smart on the human spaceflight stuff as other people, but the like when they're talking about like orbits and orbit changes and things like that, yeah, it's as accurate as you're probably gonna get in fiction.
That's really cool. If you're a wonderful fan of the channel, somebody I like to watch on Twitter and see what she's listening to and reading. Ryan, do you consider Anywhere's Project Hail Mary to be hard sci-fi?
Yeah, it's hard sci-fi. It's hard enough. It's less hard than The Martian, but I would say it's pretty hard.
David said he's a bit too hard for sci-fi for me. Savenevis, where the moon explodes. Oh,
70s, yeah.
see, that's some inside context we're getting here.
Yep.
So I'm excited to read Andy Weir and get farther in the Sun Eater saga and some others. There's not, honestly, I need to add some more hard sci-fi or at least general sci-fi authors to my TBR because it's really heavy fantasy.
Yeah,
Not because I feel like I'll like it more than fantasy, but I want to explore and make sure, right?
I would recommend Alistair Reynolds. I I like all of his stuff. Some people don't like certain books of his, but I've really liked all of them. House of Suns is really good, and then Revelation Space, and then obviously The Expanse. It's not
Mm,
again not the hardest sci-fi, but those are really good books. And
I'm enjoying book one.
yeah, I really enjoyed the TV show too. They did make
Yeah,
changes, but they made changes with the creators of it, and so they actually fixed some of the issues the early books had because they were 4 or 5 books in when this show started, so they knew they they gave certain characters more screen time. They were able to make some small changes, and I'd say the show's even better than the books because they were able to make those changes.
I've heard that a million times
Yeah,
with the show, and I've started the show. I just want to read it first, you know.
yeah. No, I got
But
you.
I've heard the same thing. Like it's incredible. It's a wonderful adaptation. Um, so, what are you working on right now, and kind of what's coming up? What's next for you?
If any of the people in my writing group are here, they're gonna laugh because I have like so many projects going, and I'm awful about finishing things, and I'll just drop something and be like, oh nope, I'm coming back to it. So, have you read Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe?
No, dude, but
Oh, okay.
I'm very interested to
So,
see what the hype of and
so
craziness is about.
I read it. I might have been when I was at the academy. So when I was in college, and I did not understand it at all. I read it again last year, and it made total sense. It was super weird. Did not make sense the first time around. Then you read it again, like, oh my god, this is all like comes sense. So I'm writing a book. It's about a just wandering mercenary, and it's a kind of like not I want it's kind of post-apocalyptic, but not really, and it's very complicated because it's not actually Earth. It's set on like a lost colony of Earth, and he's trying to get off it. but I'm using that. Book and News Sun uses a lot of very obtuse language to try to mask things like rockets or laser guns. And I'm trying to do that because I just thought that was a cool. Some of the stuff that Gene Wolfe does is so cool with language, and I don't really explore that much, right? Like I said, I'm an engineer. I write very,
Objective.
yeah, very clear prose. I don't really try to do anything. So I'm expanding a little bit, right? I'm trying to write something that's a little different. It's really a hard sci-fi novel, but it's written in the language of a fantasy novel.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes. I'm trying something different. Like we were talking about earlier, publishing. I'm writing 3 60,000 word books, and then I'll combine it and make it a paperback and like an omnibus version. But I'm going to try to get that out hopefully later this year, about 40,000 words in. I like where it's going. It's interesting. It's very different than some of the other things I've written. It's kind of a good. I think the word some other people use is like palate cleanser. With all the there's no heavy technical explanations or anything, so that part's nice. And
so that could be a very real thing for that.
Oh yeah. I'm also working on the sequel, Lagdelay. It's same characters, but it's each one of the books in that series is going to be a completely self-contained plot about some aerospace type mystery. So the third book is going to be about UFOs and the UAPs and all of that. I don't know if you've seen the Tic Tac videos.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be about that set backdrop of a potential second Korean War. But that's book 3. Book 2 is, like I said earlier, It's Not for October meets Jurassic Park.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so the main character is working on what's called a quantum sensor. So I don't know how much quantum theory, quantum mechanics. The quantum sensor.
Not much. I know a little, which is surprising to me, but I don't know much.
In the book, they developed a sensor that can detect changes at the subatomic level. It's a quantum sensor. They put it on a submarine, and they're looking for a German U-boat that has some special cargo on board, or at least that's what the main character is told. And it's out deep Atlantic trench somewhere, and there's some Russian subs hunting them, and they're not alone. Humans are not the only threat they face. So.
Oh, that sounds cool, man.
So
when I feel like some sci-fi gets too hard for me, I hear stuff like that, and I'm like, oh, hold on.
Oh, but it is
incredible.
It's hard though. It's gonna be pretty hard. Like I've been reading a bunch of submarine stuff, trying to get all that stuff right. But
that's what I'm saying. That sounds hard, and it sounds interesting at the same time.
I've actually written a draft of it, and I hate it. So I'm taking the second half, which I do like. I'm keeping that, and that's after basically the submarine gets hit by something and is laying on side on the bottom. I'm keeping that part, but
you wouldn't happen to be like super self-critical, would you?
Oh man, I'm a pretty harsh critic on my own writing. And I don't let people see stuff until I think it's ready. So I'm trying to. These are 2 books I'm working on right now. I'm trying to finish them. What I really should be working on is my one golden idea. It's Born Identity meets The Expanse. Have you ever read anything by Robert Ludlum? He's the guy who wrote the Born Identity books that
no, I haven't.
Based on. So he's very big in the conspiracy thrillers, lots of twists. He actually was very into stage and theater. So there's a lot of, the left hand's doing something and then the right hand, just comes out of nowhere and smacks the whole.
They're very fascinating to me.
Yeah. So I've always I've been a huge Ludlum fan my whole life, and I've wanted to write something like that, but in space. It's a sci-fi book. And this is the book that I've been I will be starting attempt number 7 or 8 later this year to write this one story idea. The Martian incident was supposed to lead into it. Obviously, I think so many things have changed since then. It just doesn't anymore. But I've also, ever since I was a kid, I've been fascinated with Atlantis, just the concept of Atlantis, and that plays a huge role into it. I find conspiracies fascinating, even though I don't really believe in any of them, because I work for the government, right? And I know that the government, some of the things that people accuse the government of, they couldn't pull off, not because the government wouldn't want to, but because they're just not competent enough, or you can't keep it secret from too many people. Someone would leak it to the press, someone would go on Discord and post it. It's really hard to keep secrets, but it's just that the whole concept of conspiracies has fascinated me.
So these super fast UFOs, which are the real technical name unidentified flying object. You know what I'm talking about, the videos
Oh
that
yeah.
have been out. What do you think it is? You probably know what it is. Don't spill
So
your beans if you do.
no, I'm gonna say is how many Air Force pilots have been seeing them? Go look up which
Dude,
pilots have been
yeah.
reporting it. It's all Navy dudes. I'll leave you with that. And
This, I got you.
yeah. So
My guess is there's like some countries with some pretty technical,
that's entirely
well,
possible.
technology.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I wouldn't have a clue. I don't
Yeah.
think there's green guys in it.
No, I would. That I think is a little hard. If the government didn't know, it'd be kind of hard to keep that from people. You know, someone would say
Yeah.
something.
I mean, think about the inside scoop of well, it could be anything. Whether somebody said, I mean, the president, today's president, he said some stuff at a certain get together in Congress, and it's like he couldn't even keep that secret. Like
Yeah.
the microphones picked him up.
Mhm.
Like the fact that these people think that there's these huge unknown or like secrets being hidden from them. Look, there's going to be more than a couple people that would know about it, and yeah, I have the very same opinion as you do, but I'm also having an open mind as well. So
You have to,
I'm
right?
yeah, I'm brave enough and honest enough to say I have no idea, and I'll never claim to know, and I'm not smarter than the next guy. But it's interesting to think about either way.
So I have a whole book outlined where I'm going to like. That's the whole core concept, right? Is it's say about 10 years in the future, there's going to be a second Korean War and everyone's all mad at each other. And then these UFOs start to show up and start, flying around. It is based on one of my theories as to what they are. And of course, because it's fiction, that thing, there's a big twist and that thing gets, thrown out the window about 2/3 in the book. But I'm hoping it's not actually what it is, because that will not make it through Pentagon if it is what my theory is.
So when you're out of the military, you're still gonna have to get
Lifetime
clearance?
NDA, man. Nope. Oh
Okay.
yeah, I saw my clearance working for Blue, but even if I wasn't, I'd still, because of the paperwork I signed up. Even if I didn't have my clearance, I'd still have to put everything.
Okay. That makes sense. Dealing with certain things that the typical populace doesn't deal with. I can understand why that would be a thing. It's cool to hear about too, because I don't talk to a lot of people in the military
How far
anymore.
are you from
now.
Dayton?
From Dayton, like an hour and 15 minutes. I used to live in Wilmington. I'm sure if you lived in. Yeah, I grew up in Wilmington. I played football, all that stuff there, and then I live in Chillicothe, Ohio now, which is closer to Columbus.
Columbus, yeah.
But grew up in the Dayton areas. Yeah, it's okay. I live in, like I said, Chillicothe, which is like the beginning of the Appalachian Mountains. Lots of hills, lots of rundown trailers that people actually live in. It's like I'll never understand that, but it's okay. There's some nature around for the kids, and yeah, I grew up in Wilmington. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of flat farmland, but the school system was fun. I liked the sports, and if you've been in Dayton, which obviously you've been to Right Pat, I love the museum.
I was about to ask you if you've been there. I love that museum.
Yeah. It's incredible. I grew up going there, so I went to school at Wright State. So
okay, right
there,
State, wrong university.
And you're right, yeah, dude. I forgot that saying. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
You've been there. I know.
I got
you have, you know
I got
that.
a lot of my buddies from that I work with on the base there. They're all Wright State grads.
I used to hear that, like, "Oh, you go to Wright State? Wrong university." I was like, "Come on, man! How many times do I have to hear that?"
Wright State's actually a pretty good school.
It's
They
growing.
Programs.
They do the nursing program, which is where I wanted to go. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to finish. I got sick or whatever. But it's a great, like, you have to fight to get in that nursing program. They start at the 4.0s. Fill that nursing program, and if you're less than like a 3.8, you're not getting it anyway. I probably wouldn't have been able to make it in, honestly, but hey, whatever.
That's the University of Dayton grads used to give the Wright State grads. Yep.
Well, University of Dayton is more expensive, so naturally that's going to be the better college, and it may have been. I don't know.
From the grads that I work with, would not go that far.
I went to some March Madness games at UD.
Oh yeah,
it was fun.
They used to do the first four or whatever there.
Yeah.
I
I
want
don't
to
know
go.
if you guys remember OJ Mayo. He
I remember
actually got in a lot of trouble with the law and like really hurt somebody and got kicked out. But he was headed to the NBA, and that's sad.
Yep.
You know, these talented players just do some
Mhm.
stupid shit. Anywho, uh, a lot of you've done a really good job of encompassing all of the influences. Some of the questions I had were answered, and I didn't even ask them. One being like, what would you recommend that I read?
I
That's really
recommend
been an influence
I
you.
recommend Revelation Space to everyone, especially if you've played the video game Mass Effect. Mass Effect series is probably my favorite video game series of all time, and there's a lot of influences that I can. I don't think they've said it outright, but they definitely read Revelation Space before they wrote it. There's some really clear lines you can draw.
So we flat or we spherical? What is it?
So
I know the answer.
we're actually an oblate spheroid. We're a little fat around the equator, and we're a little skinny at the poles.
So what do we at? Like a 23 degree angle?
Well, that's a tilt. I'm talking from a mass distribution. We're
See, I have no clue.
around the waist. We're around the equator. There's a little bit of a bulge, and then there's a little squished in at the poles.
That's so interesting, man.
Yeah, and it make because the Earth's mass is not uniformly distributed. It makes orbits harder than they orbit determination harder than it could be. That's called the J2 effect. And if you ever do orbit determination, I highly doubt you will or anyone else.
I won't.
Yeah, that's what's called. Dude, that's a J2 effect. And there's a whole bunch of other things that impact orbits, but that the mass distribution is one of the big ones.
But stuff like that, where it's like you find yourself getting really deep in objective things like math and equations. It fascinated me, but challenged me to the point where I almost got just too worked up in my mind to really understand it. I forget the name of the equation, but in astronomy, it was like calculating the possibility of life on other planets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember it, but it's super long, and the scientists tell us that it's an accurate representation of chance of life on the other planets, which I'm not saying it's not, but I don't understand it.
That's well beyond my wheelhouse.
So, David, we're a circle, man. To us normal kids, we're a circle, we're a sphere. The flat earthers, I just never have heard. So, first of all, there's lots of proof of this, but second of all, the things these people come up with to argue a flat Earth,
I think a lot of them are just trying to be funny.
Yeah, dude, they have to. It just sounds so idiotic. So I like to ask people, and this could be an author, it could be an editor, it could be a scientist, anybody that you would, and I'm after this endless pursuit of knowledge. I've told you this, and knowing that, who are some people you would recommend I chat with on the channel? They could be anybody.
Oh boy. Trying to think of any of my writing buddies would actually, a lot of them are, I don't want to say secretive, but I think they're less apt to show their face on camera. So I run a writing server and I got friends in it. One of the other people who write it he's a British short story author, and he's published he's at least over a dozen, but I think less than 2 dozen. He'll probably hit me after this. His name is Rick Danforth. He's a cloud architect, lives in the UK. He writes sci-fi and fantasy short stories, and he also does mixed martial arts. So he's a very interesting guy.
He's a determined, disciplined individual.
Yeah. So I don't know how if you ever have UK or European based.
Oh yeah,
you do. Okay.
Dude, I had a UK guy on the very first interview today.
Oh, it's
I've had people from New Zealand, Australia, Portugal. I'm all over the map.
So yeah, he'd be interesting. He's a real smart guy, and he and I view things differently, but we're also good friends because we both write, and we write a lot, and we take it somewhat seriously.
I like to talk to people who I disagree with the most. And this is what I do different than the normal everyday American you see on TV. I don't hate those people. Guess what? I listen to what the hell they have to say. And
Mhm.
so I have my political and religious views, and nobody on this channel will ever know. I say that all the time. You'll never
I'm the
guess, you'll
same
never
way.
know.
I
And
that's
the
it's
thing is
personal,
if
right?
you completely disagree with me, look, we can still be the best
Right.
of friends.
Hmm.
I will never look down on anybody for their political views. Come on, people, we're better than that.
I will say though,
Um,
Rick is also a Steelers fan. He likes American football, so I don't
I'm
know.
not in the NFL, so I have
Okay.
no interest in NFL. I'm a Michigan fan, and I live in Ohio next to Columbus, so I get the hate. I'm not dishing it out. My
They
mom and
take
dad are from Michigan, so
they take the M out of everything, right? During the game week. You know.
I went to a Michigan Ohio State game in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with my sister when we graduated high school, and there were like a couple rows of the Ohio State fans, and they were spitting on Michigan fans, and I was like just flabbergasted at the degradation of a human being when you spit on them. Come on,
Mhm.
this is a football game, people.
And
So I
it's
try not
funny
to get too serious.
because you know because you're from Ohio, you know this. Half them didn't even go to Ohio State.
Oh, yeah. This is like an indoctrinated like
Yeah.
passion between dads. Yes, for sure. And Michigan's just hated here, and of course, in Michigan, Ohio State's not liked, but not to the point that it is here.
Yeah.
It's a little too serious, if you ask me. It's a game, people. Um, I have to say, I'm going to have you back on because I have a lot to cover, and I have a lot of books to read, and then us talk about.
I'm more happy. And actually, later this year is better too because I'm. It's been crazy right now. So my wife is doing her master's degree through University of Virginia. I'm switching
And what?
careers. Education.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
Congrats, man.
so it's fine. My wife was a pre-med major at CU Boulder and decided not
Mhm.
to go to med school. So she did Teach for America. And she taught in West Dayton in the hood for 2 years. And
Yeah,
then we started having kids. So she's been
that's
away
where
from
it
her for a bit.
matters the most in
Yep.
places like that.
Oh yeah. And
Huge respect.
so she stopped teaching, but she's trying to get back in. And no one around here in DC will hire her because her academic background's on biology and physiology and stuff.
Yeah, if you go to school to be a doctor, it's strictly like biology, pre-med, anatomy,
Chemistry,
physiology,
lots of
yeah,
chemistry. Yeah,
chemistry, organic.
but but she's smart. She did very well, and she was teaching in the hood. So you'd think she'd be doing good at these suburban schools, but they won't hire her. So she actually using my GI Bill to go get her master's. So she's slammed, and then I'm switching careers, which is never ever easy. And that so but
No, but you're
I'd be
both doing what you want, man.
yeah, that's right. We're doing I was telling my brother this earlier this week. We're doing our midlife crises in our early 30s. So
Yeah, so I think what you're doing by doing what you want and
mhm.
kind of taking initiative to do so, especially your wife going for pre-med to education, there's a passion in education for
Oh
her.
yeah,
I could tell that, and I don't
she,
even know anything about her.
yeah, she likes kids. Just she'd
Yeah.
rather work with kids than adults. So
Well, you have four of them, so that makes sense. That's incredible, man. I love to hear stuff like that. That's true passion and love for what you want to do and the motivation to do so.
mhm.
Um, I have to say, Ryan Skeffington, man, he's a bullshitter, but he wasn't bullshitting about having a cool conversation with you.
He's a good dude.
He
He's good
is.
people.
I was joking. He knows I don't think he's a bullshitter. I absolutely loved Lost Souls, man, and he knows
It's a good
this too.
book.
It is. I
The-
like.
the-
I'm a dark fantasy lover, so I like the dystopian kind of
yeah, it's like
dark
a
side of
sci-fi
it.
take on that, right? It's like a sci. It can. There's harder sci-fi there too, but it's not about that. It's about the characters, and he did
It
a good
is.
job. He did a really good
He
job
did
with
good
the
job.
emotion and getting all that together.
He did say that you were a stickler about some things. He's like, man, he taught me some things, and I took it
Yeah.
serious.
So
So
I taught I'll take I will more than happy to take this one on. I taught Ryan how to do third person limited perspective. When he was writing scenes, it was like a camera was like panning around.
mhm.
And that's not how books are written. You're in someone's head if you're writing third limited. I'm like, are you writing third limited or third omniscient? And the omniscience where there's like a narrator, right? He's like, I'm not doing either of those. I'm writing it like there's a camera floating around. And I'm like, no. So and that he's yeah, see,
I,
he is a bullshitter. But yeah, so we work with him with that. He and I kind of disagree on this. I don't like long paragraphs. That's something when I'm as a reader, my eyes, especially if it's not as important to the plot, if it's like character development or something like that, I'll just glaze over it. And he definitely likes his paragraphs a little longer.
So I'm in
So
the same camp as Ithra. Like I'm writing, but you ask me what the perspective I'm in, and I'm going to tell you I have no
yeah,
clue.
and that's
I need
totally
to ask the
normal.
difference.
I wrote a lot early in Third Omniscient because that's what the when the sci-fi writers that I read, um, like Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, they write like Tolkien. Third Omniscient, there's a narrator or there's you can jump around from head to head, but that's not what the modern reader wants. Modern reader wants either first or third, close in, right in the character's head, knowing everything they're thinking. So that was a hard jump for me to do that, and that's how I write now. Everything's third limited. I'm not a big fan of first person.
What I think I've learned by reading for
Yeah.
what has inspired me and what I think I'll like as a writer is chapters that are points of view. I really
Oh,
enjoy
yes.
those.
It's neat, right? Especially if you get someone who's not the normal point of view.
Mm.
You see things from their perspective. I love that. The Expanse does a really good job of that. That's one of the reasons I like it the most because they'll have people just pop in for a chapter or two. They won't be in the whole book, but you'll see events that just happened from their perspective, and it's cool. It is really cool.
So Ryan says a super humble, cool thing. You know, as much as he hates to give credit, he has to say he's right.
You know, and Ryan Scavington did a lot of hard work. The book that you read is not the book that I saw, and he did a lot of really good work editing that and putting it in the format it's in right now.
Every author needs that, and I think that's a pivotal point, man. So, so space officer or space force officer, author, guy that's going to be doing some cool things in the future, moving on to the next big thing. Has a wonderful family, 4 kids and a wife, doing cool stuff, and I respect it. So I wanted to say, man, I appreciate you hanging out with me on the channel.
Thanks, man. For having me.
Absolutely. This won't be the last time.
Oh, definitely won't be.
Gonna go kiss the babies and read some, and really looking forward to sending everybody, including you, some fresh ideas that I have for the future, and I hope the best for your transfer from
it's
being
not
a soldier.
It's not easy. It's a very complicated bureaucratic process. So I'm almost at the end of it, so that part's good.
So again, I hope the best, and I hope it goes as clean as that can, man. So until next time, man, thank you again for hanging out with me. For you guys that were live, commenting as you always do, I appreciate that so much. And those who will watch it on replay, thank you as well. And we will see you next time. I'm talking. Oh, before I forget, I have to say the YouTube stuff, right? Like, share, comment, all that fun stuff. It helps. Tomorrow I'll be talking with, the author of Dragon Mage, which, guys, it's just blown my freaking mind, that book. ML Spencer, she's going to be on the show tomorrow, I believe 8:30. 8 or 8:30. I'll let you know on Twitter. Either way, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Ryan, have a wonderful night, man.
Thanks,
and thank your family for letting me borrow you.
Yep. Signing off. Have a good night, everyone.
Yep. Goodbye, guys.